Thank you, Jan, for the introduction, and thank you, Peter, for your very clear and good overview over the subject. I have prepared a talk about the cross-border use of out-of-commerce works by cultural heritage institutions and the DSM proposal. But I must say that I feel very strongly about starting to comment to Peter's introduction, but I will keep with my plan, and if I have time, I'm timing myself, I may go into some discussion about it. So I will be talking about this. I'm going to briefly talk about the proposal and also then discuss how it's compatible with the Nordic ECL system. So the EU has, for nearly 2 decades, been very politically committed to facilitate the dissemination and preservation of the European cultural heritage. And that is fact, so I've been looking at libraries and ECLs and cross-border use. So, however, the attempts, former attempts like the Memorandum of Understanding for making out-of-commerce works available and the Orphan Works Directive have not been very successful, even though they were an important step in the right direction, and have not enabled cultural heritage institutions to step firmly into the digital age. Sorry, can you pass me the glass? Thank you. It's my glass, thank you. This can be seen, for example, Europeana, which, as I hope most of you do know, which is a website giving online access to the European heritage. It is meant to be the flagship of the European efforts of giving digital access. However, it is still mainly giving access to out-of-copyright works due to complication of rights clearance. So the situation has now led the Commission to propose the use of extended collective licenses or presumed mandate for the use of out-of-commerce works in cultural heritage institutions. So this is in the DSM proposal, which we've already heard about. We have had some very good overview over the legislative process and what's going on. So I will not go further into the proposal as such. And the proposed solution for the use of works by cultural heritage institutions is to stipulate that member states must provide that non-exclusive collective licenses for cultural heritage institutions for the use of works in their collections can be binding for non-members of the relevant CMO under certain conditions, and that furthermore the license or agreement can have cross-border effect. Outsiders can thus be bound by such licenses or agreements, either by extended collective licenses or by presumed representation of the relevant CMO, which is more the German way, how they have dealt with outsiders. But this is, by this proposal, the Commission has significantly changed its view with regard to ECLs, which it had previously rejected for EU legislation for the Orphan Work Directives and also for the CMO Directive for the multi-territorial licenses. So that's a very good development. The cross-border effect of the solution in the proposal is ensured by stipulating that cultural heritage institutions in all other member states may use the works in accordance with the terms of the license. So, the recognition of the license in all other member states. But anyway, there are some limitations for the use of the solution. It would only apply to non-exclusive licenses and only for out-of-commerce works, out-of-commerce but in-commerce works that are permanently in the collection of the relevant institution. Furthermore, it's also limited to works first published or broadcast in the country where the license is sought. There's not time, I don't have time to discuss here how it will be determined which works are out of commerce, which can be a thorny issue, like we know from the orphan works, how we define what is orphan works. But it's clear from the proposal that importance is put on workable and efficient solutions. Furthermore, there are certain conditions. Sorry about all the photos that I was going to have here, which were supposed to entertain you while I was talking. So we're here. This one. Yeah. There are certain conditions that must be fulfilled before the solution can be used. First, the relevant CMO must be broadly representative in the category of works and the rights which are the subject of the license. Second, equal treatment must be guaranteed to all right holders the license extends to, that is, both members and non-members, and presumably also to different kinds of right holders, such as authors or publishers. And third, all right holders must be able to opt out the license, both with regard to the opt-out of commerce status and the application of the license to their works. Additionally, there are requirements for publicity measures and for stakeholders' dialogue to ensure the relevance and usability of the system. With regard to the cross-border use, there are further requirements. Before a work is used in a cross-border context, information about the work and the opt-out possibility must be made publicly accessible in a single online portal, which will be managed by the EU IPO office. And if the solution is adopted, this requirement, it must be very carefully stipulated or regulated that it doesn't stifle all digitization projects that are supposed to have cross-border effect. Such stifling could happen if a prior identification of each and every work falling under the collective license were required 6 months before the start of the project. One way to approach this might be to limit projects to national level in the initial stage, while the works were being digitized, and then later to make them applicable for cross-border use. So this is my short overview of the proposal. I'll see how I forgot to put the timer on. How am I doing for time? Thank you. So now comes my complicated page. So far it has just been very straightforward. So the compatibility of the solution with the ECL system. The first answer is obviously, in principle, yes. It's probably based on the Nordic ECL license up to a point. So it's clearly compatible with the Nordic system. However, the proposed solution is more limited in scope than the Nordic ECL provision that are relevant for cultural heritage institutions such as libraries. First, it only applies to non-commercial uses. Second, it only applies to out-of-commerce works, although this can be defined in a flexible way. Third, all right holders shall have a right to opt out, both members of the CMO and the outsiders. Fourth, it applies only to works with a specific connection to the member state where the license is sought. And one of the major concerns with this, as with all ECL license outside of, is how the requirement of that CMOs are representative of right holders, how that will be assessed. The terminology used in the proposal can be seen, if you look at it in a positive way, and I do, as advocating the pragmatic practice and interpretation of the requirement as has been done in the Nordic countries. So with regard to the works in the field rather than to each and every work that is going to be digitized. Furthermore, an important question is whether, after the adoption of the mechanism, online use for cultural heritage institutions can still be restricted geographically, like the Norwegian Bokula project, whether this solution, if adopted, will limit that possibility, so that all, okay. And furthermore, which I know, which is, there are some agreements that do actually have cross-border effect already, and it's an example of that is the German agreement in Germany, which is not extended collective license, and we also have the Finnish agreement between the National Gallery and the relevant Finnish Finnish CMOs. So I have more or less run out of time. I could talk a long time about the applicable law. I find that other possibilities than where the uses happen could be used. But in general, my view is, in concluding, my view is that this proposal is a positive and necessary step in the right direction. However, as we have heard, most of us have heard, there have been concerns about whether the proposal will in fact narrow the scope of the ECLs in general. Thus, it has been proposed to underline in a recital, and I even have heard that some have proposed an article, to underline that the proposal is without prejudice to the arrangement in the Member States concerning the management of such rights. The Commission has said that it's not the intention of the proposal to limit the use. However, I think we should have a clear either recital or article. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Rán.